Golly, Fox Sports has got some real lawsuits against their heads today, and we've got a lot to cover in this episode, so welcome to another Shatter the Script episode. I'm your host, Jared May. Thanks for joining. Happy New Year to you guys, and we're recording on January 6th, my favorite holiday of all time, and of course, I'm feeling a little bit trolly, but I just want to get the records. We have to talk about January 6th for just a little bit, as it is worse than pretty much any American incident in history. And in all seriousness, it's worse than all the bad ones you can think of. 9/11, the Las Vegas shooting, the Holocaust, World War II, D-Day, the whole thing. You name it, the Afghan pullout. This day is a day of mourning, but it's also a day of celebration, because January 6th brings a lot of positivity. As many would know, it's actually my grandpa's birthday, so we're a little audible there. Oh my gosh, I could troll for hours about January 6th. All my close friends know that it is just a hilarious day in our history. But I'm happy for you guys to be joining with us. A lot of jokes to begin this show. Shannon Sharp, not really involved with those lawsuits, but I just think it's funny because if they got into a heated argument, that shit was in the back of his head. But yeah, look, in case you're unaware, there have been allegations to Fox Sports from essentially a female hairdresser from the network, and it involves Skip Bayless, Joy Taylor, and others, some executives and whatnot. We'll get into that. But there's a lot of really good criteria for this episode. And I kind of want to take you guys through what this episode is going to look like. So obviously college football, the quarterfinals was a pretty interesting week. You had Ohio State and Oregon. That matchup wasn't the way that a lot of people anticipated it to go. There won't be too much to cover in that episode, in that matchup. Texas and Arizona State, Cam Scadaboo, balled out. That game went down to the wire. By far the best college football playoff game that we've seen this year in the new format. And then you got on the other side, Notre Dame and Georgia, and there were some comments made. And then some bowl game activity. We're going to go back to a little bit of that SEC mania, to where we'll listen in on some comments made from Lane Kiffin, and then we'll go into that. In the NFL world, obviously the playoffs are starting this weekend, but you had a lot of incentives on the table for a lot of NFL players this weekend. Mike Evans, it wasn't really an incentive base. It might have been included in his contract, but everybody was focused on him getting his 11th straight season with 1,000 yards receiving, to get up there with Jerry Rice. Now, in relation to those incentives, you have Jerry Jones and Cooper Rush. So we'll get into what happened there and just what kind of an asshole Jerry Jones is. And maybe there also will be some positivity with Jerry Jones, actually, and it might shock you what I'm going to bring up, because I don't think a lot of people have seen it or really would expect it. So yeah, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the lawsuit. We're going to get into the college football playoffs. We're going to get into a little bit of muddy waters, if you will, because the networks, as you know, this podcast loves to attack the narratives of the mainstream media, and they're pushing some pretty stupid narratives this week concerning race. So, per usual, I'm going to go into that. This is probably my fourth time on this show. Going through something like that. It's always muddy waters, but I think the people that know me close they know where it's going to be coming from. So let's get right into it. So honestly, where I do want to start, I want to start with the simple stuff. I want to start with the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones. Now, if you guys are unaware, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of incentives this week for NFL athletes. And, quarterback Dak Prescott went down with an injury earlier this season. So he probably didn't meet a lot of them. But, year one of his brand new contract, irrelevant, right? Well, Cooper Rush comes in to fill in for him. And, he's playing a lot of these games. I mean, the majority of the season, more than 50% of the games, and honestly was keeping the team afloat along with the defense and whatnot, doing a pretty dang good job for a backup quarterback, right? A lot like the Jake Browning year in Cincinnati last year. Just kind of keep him in the hunt, keep him afloat, like keep it competitive. We're going to fight and whatnot. I mean, if you look at it, the Cowboys were a blocked punt and a game-winning touchdown this past weekend and against the Bengals from being above 500, from being 9-8. And if you told me that this team was going to be above 500 after the Dak Prescott injury, the Falcons game, yeah. Well, there was an incentive for Cooper Rush, and I'll go into what that is. And Cooper Rush, if he was at 52.5% of snaps, his incentive was if he played more than 55% of the snaps this season, then he would get a $500,000 bonus if he met that incentive. And like I mentioned, he was at 52.5% of his snaps going into the final week of the season. Well, if you can guess what geriatric Jerry Jones did this weekend, well, remember that dumbass trade that Jerry Jones just did off of a whim a year and a half ago with Trey Lance? Traded a 4th-round draft pick for Trey Lance, who was the emergency quarterback and a practice squad player for the whole time that he's been in Dallas. So, yeah, remember that one? Well, Jerry kind of forgot he was there, right? And he had this whole season to kind of maybe show if he's got some talent. Well, no. We're going to wait till the last game, and we're going to put in Trey Lance and see if we can get something back for this 4th-rounder, because we may not keep him. Let's see if we have something in him, see if any other teams would be interested in taking this guy. And on top of that, we'll trade another 4th-rounder for Jonathan Mingo earlier and him be like a 4th-string wide receiver, and other teams will get better players for less value. So he missed out on that. Cooper Rush missed out on the $500K bonus because Trey Lance got the start. Now, well, actually, I want to retract that, because I was going to say, is it a bad thing that Trey Lance started? Well, yeah, like Cooper Rush, I guess, understands his role. I mean, obviously, he's not a starter in this league. He's good enough to play in the league, and he's a very serviceable backup. Understands the system, especially in Dallas. It's the only system he's been in. Showed some flashes of pretty good efficiency when the defense held their own. But it's extremely unfair because other teams were fighting their tails off to get their players their incentives. And some missed by, a couple yards. Some got him by a couple yards. Speaking of, the Mike Evans one, he was about 7 or 8 yards short, and they threw him an out route, and he got 9 yards, and the whole team celebrated. So that's 11 straight seasons. And you got to remember about Mike Evans. Mike Evans rarely plays the full season. So people going into his stat line, again, the box score watchers are going into his stat line going, oh, he's barely eclipsing 1,000 yards every season, and Jerry Rice was, well, like, again, for all those people that do that, they love the hypotheticals, right? Well, what if, Mike Evans played the full season? And I believe 2018 he played the full season, and he did extremely well. But, this is just classic Dallas Cowboys right here. I mean, look, I'm a Dak Prescott fan. I think he is a good quarter. I really think he doesn't deserve any of the hate that he gets. I think he is, when he's playing healthy, I think he's a top 12 quarterback in the NFL, and he has the potential to do what an MVP can do in a regular season. He showed that 2 of the last 4 seasons. And so that slander when Cooper Rush would come in and say, well, Cooper Rush is 5-1 as a starter. And you're like, you have to watch the games. This is a completely different offense. It's completely sheltered. It's completely shutter in place. And it's defensive. It's defensive. Like, it all leans towards the defensive side of the ball. And you saw that with their success this year, too. I mean, there was games where Cooper Rush played outstanding. And I'm happy for him because the guy's been warming the bench his whole career. He's basically the modern-day Chase Daniels. And it's just extremely unfair, in my opinion. I mean, to do that, kind of to rob that guy of his money. And then the part that got me most irritated was in a post game interview, and we've gone through the Jerry Jones, you know, circus is of all the titles he has. I'm general manager, I'm president, I'm owner, and blah blah blah. And he doubled down. It's like, I will never sell the team. I bought this team. I want to remain the general manager for as long as I live. So literally until this man croaks, he will be your GM. And as the GM, the responsibility, when I talked about, I said, this is on you, Jerry. All of this is on you because you're the general manager. You have to take responsibility. And he comes out with comments after this game saying, well, we didn't know that was in his contract. I didn't see that. I just figured it out now. Either one, you were that delirious, right? Like, he genuinely didn't know because he's an older guy, but also he's got the support system to tell him, right? And say, oh, yeah, hey, by the way, because every year it's like this. Every year there are incentives to contracts and say, hey, look, this guy's 16 rushing yards shy of getting a 150K bonus for Tony Pollard, like in his rookie year or something like that. Like, let's get him some early on carries, see if we can get the ball rolling, get him that incentive, and then we'll go back to our normal offense. Like, let's incorporate that and give the young man his money, give the young man his bread. These guys are fighting for different types of bonuses, and they've been playing hard. Your team, the Dallas Cowboys, stayed afloat. I wouldn't say because of Cooper Rush, but he played a major role in that. So to say that you didn't know it was in the contract and that you were just now hearing about it as a general manager, it's just nonsense to suggest that. That's completely on you, Jerry Jones, and it's a very selfish move. There's a word that I want to say that it like. I guess I'm going to go with egotistical. I was going to be like out of pocket funny, but I'm going to go with egotistical. And it's why nobody wins championships over there in Dallas. I mean, you got like a head coach would come in there if he was doing his own thing and say, I'm getting this guy's incentive. I'm letting this dude play the first half. Then we'll see what Trey Lance has in the second half. Because, we're eliminated from the playoffs. Let's just, who knows? We might just throw him a curveball in the second half and Trey Lance goes out there and balls out, right? And so that's my big argument with that is, and I can't stress that enough. It was a very, very selfish move from Jerry Jones. He knew what he was doing. And if he didn't, then it's on the Cowboys front office organization for not telling him. But I'm sure there were other incentives that needed to be met for other players. And, probably more on the defensive side because the offensive players were very, very, like the pass catchers and whatnot, were very, very hurt throughout the year. But, man, yeah, I'm pissed off. Like, it makes the people want to give Cooper Rush $500K. And Jerry better do the right thing and give him that money because damn well he's got it. And so shout out to Cooper Rush, man, on a season to where, like, obviously you didn't expect you to come in. You didn't expect Dak to get an injury mid-season, and that's always a really tough job to be a backup quarterback and then to come in and have the expectation to be a Dallas Cowboy. So he deserved that money. Whether you think he's good, bad, awful, whatever. So, yeah. And so this next topic that I want to go into, and it's kind of a whole plethora of just the four-letter channel, obviously, of ESPN. You may have heard of it, right? And so obviously, like, there was the attack in New Orleans, around the day of the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day, and awful tragedy, right? Well, ESPN decided to go a different route with that and not address it publicly on their channel. They decided their network's going to be talking about the LGBT who gives a fuck organization, or that group, a minority, whatever. You know where I'm going with it. And then on top of that, in the college football atmosphere, you had Notre Dame with a fantastic win over Georgia. Yes, they had their backup quarterback in. Fantastic win, right? And I've been praising on Twitter. I love Marcus Freeman. This dude is a rock star. I would play for him, and if I had the talent, I'd play for him. I love what he's doing. And believe me, y'all have heard me on this show. I am not a big Notre Dame fan. Like, the brand Notre Dame, I want them, if they joined a conference, I would gain a whole lot more respect for them. And I think the rest of the country would too. But in terms of human being, coaching style, ethics, and whatnot, Marcus Freeman checks every single box. And for them to come out and say what they say after their great win versus Georgia, Riley Leonard coming out and praising Jesus Christ and whatnot, like, that's awesome. But his response to a specific question, because ESPN is going with a new narrative that you've seen before, about two African American coaches being in the college football national championship for the first time in history, and maybe getting a first ever African American head coach to win the national championship. And his response is great. So I'm going to start with that one. We're going to start with Marcus Freeman because I think that's the most relevant way to go about this story, and then we'll translate into the rest of the crap that they're talking about at this network. But here at this, in this podcast, that's what we do. We take the mainstream media and we debunk it, and we give you the truth, authentic. So let's share the screen here and get rolling with this Marcus Freeman clip. All right.
You and James Franklin are kind of making history here. Can you kind of just put in perspective what it means to you to be, one of two black coaches in this playoffs?
Yeah, it's again, you're very grateful. It's a reminder that you are a representation for many others, and many of our players that look the same way I do. That your color shouldn't matter, right? And that the evidence of your work should. But it takes everybody.
You and James.
Yeah, so perfect response here from Marcus Freeman. And, this narrative where, they get the good old post on ESPN and they announce that, the James Franklin and the Marcus Freeman agenda and whatnot, and, two black coaches in the college football national championship. And Marcus Freeman says it shouldn't be about the color of your skin. It should be about, the work you put in, the effort that goes into being a coach, your qualifications as a man. And, that's exactly the response that an average American would be looking to hear, because they don't want, again, it's such a battered argument. We've talked about it over and over and over again for the last 6 to 7, it feels like a century, ever since I've been alive, this in actually being able to think for myself, this has been a topic that has just been shoved down our throats, no Diddy, for a long time. And when you hear this stuff, you scoff. You got to be honest with yourself. Oh my gosh. And what response from Marcus Freeman would sound better, would give you a more positive outlook on the country, the direction of where the National College Football Playoffs and National Championship is going? Or, which one? Would it be Marcus Freeman going into a 5-minute spiel about discrimination and brutality and all of this political agenda and saying, well, yeah, great question. I am this, and because of the suffering and you're just like, all of this is just terrible. And I don't want to hear this. This isn't this isn't sports. This is. And Bill Burr talks about, the comedian of all people, talks about, it's just constant. It's like, man, I wish football and sports, I can go watch a ball game and get a hot dog without, everything around you being bigger than the game. Why can't I just take 2 to 3 hours to completely escape from all the nonsense and just watch a ball game? And we've talked about it before, players having voices and whatnot. I think that's great, especially, off the field. If they have their own platform, they want to speak their mind, go and do it. Huge advocate for it. Who am I to say that that's wrong to do when I do it myself? But when Marcus Freeman goes up there and says, and I'll go back, would you rather have Avenue A saying, well, yeah, we've been discriminated against, my minority culture, racism, slavery back in the day, and you're just like, oh, all this negative stuff. And then he flips it. Or Avenue B is, I don't think, color should matter. I think that, the content of your character and your leadership and the results on the field, I think, speak for themselves. And, James Franklin does an outstanding job over there at Penn State as well. And that stuff shouldn't matter. And I'm just really excited for this opportunity. I'm very grateful to be a head coach at a big brand like Notre Dame and have the success that I've been able to have thanks to the young gentlemen, out in the field. The 85 people on my roster, the walk-ons, everybody that made this journey special, the assistant coaches, no matter the skin color. I'm just so grateful to be here, and I thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for this opportunity. Which one sounds more positive to you? Because one narrative is like, and I get it, the question was asked in a positive manner, but you know where they're going to take it. Because if Marcus Freeman said Avenue A, down the race path, they would take that narrative and twist it the next day. And Stephen A. and Shannon Sharp and all these people and Dan Orlovsky are going to go into this from a race perspective. But now they can't do that because Marcus Freeman completely destroyed the question and said that's irrelevant. Why should that matter? Why are we even talking about it? And guess what? They had something else to talk about on ESPN. So they chose a different route because I think what they were hoping for was that Marcus Freeman or James Franklin or any of these coaches or analysts would start getting into these heated debates, apply it to maybe the attacks in New Orleans and the target and victims. And so that's what they kind of focused on we can't cover any of this other stuff that we thought we were going to cover. So we're going to cover how the LGBTQI plus who gives a shit group was affected. And so listen to this clip from, I don't even know her name, just one of those random DEI hires, right? And so we're going to share a screen here once again, and y'all can get a load of this. I mean, I think this is by far the worst. So here's a caption from Clay Travis here. Pausing in solidarity with people angry about the Don't Say Gay bill, they shared a moment of silence for this, but couldn't share the moment of silence for the terror victims in New York on air. Absolutely indefensible. Now let's listen to the content.
Legislation happening in Florida and across other states as well that are targeting our LGBTQI plus communities. Many of our colleagues here at ESPN have planned and organized a walkout that will be happening at 3 p.m. Eastern today. And to be honest with you, we thought we were going to come here today and really celebrate a sport that has meant so much and done so much, including for so many in the LGBTQI plus communities. But we understand the gravity of this legislation and also how it is affecting so many families across this country. And because of that, our allyship is going to take a front seat. And with that, we're going to pause in solidarity.
I didn't laugh the first time that I watched that, but I'm laughing now. So more than a dozen people died in New Orleans on Bourbon Street on a day that people celebrate, New Year's Day. But the Don't Say Gay bill, oh my God. Hide your dildos. The Don't Say Gay bill. I mean, come on. A pause for solidarity. I mean, I'm laughing, but you should be furious. I mean, and I get it. Probably nobody was watching. That was, women's college basketball, and the score was 44-4. Everybody probably tuned out already. I mean, 44-4. What the hell? South Carolina, I'm pretty sure was a team that was shown on there. Great college basketball team. I think they've been great for a long time. But Clay Travis is absolutely right. And I've praised his work before, and I'm not trying to be divisive here. What I'm trying to say is there are more important issues at hand. And if ESPN, you want to be the alma mater for every social issue, every political issue, every sports issue on the planet, and cover dot every I and cross every T for every single issue that comes across, why wouldn't you talk about the New Orleans thing? And, I get it, live on air the day of the Sugar Bowl, which should have been played on, the day that it should have been played on, they were talking about it, right? Well, because they had to. The game was canceled. And then Allstate comes out with their commercial saying that, we shouldn't discriminate against this sort of group, and that we shouldn't, buy into divisiveness and hatefulness and whatnot. and almost like sounded like they were protecting the act of violence. It was incredible. I mean, it's incredible. And to say that what happened in New Orleans is not worth a pause for solidarity. And, again, we're recording on January 6th, where I believe reportedly one person died, and it was proved that it was a setup and whatnot. And you call these things, people actually on air, like in The View, are calling this thing like worse than the Holocaust, where millions of Jews died, or worse than World War II, where millions of Americans of all colors and backgrounds and whatnot died, for almost a decade. What? Like, this needs to be recognized. Get up on the show. Forget the don't say gay bill. Who cares? I didn't even know it was going on. I knew about it, but it's like, okay, like whatever. Is it sports related? The New Orleans attack happened in the Sugar Bowl was canceled and postponed because of the incident. But you chose the don't say gay bill, which affects the families. And, this community it's been such a big avenue for entertainment for this community. No, it hasn't. Name one gay NFL player. Name one gay NBA player. Name one gay, other than Karl Anthony Towns, one gay MLB player. What? Like, sure, everybody can watch the sports, but like, my audience knows this. Like, if you're an actual human being, you're so tired of this crap just getting shoved in your face and saying, like, we're going to pause for solidarity. Remote, click off. I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to go to workout in or something. But that was ridiculous, And they continue to try and drive this negativity down your throat to where they actually could have absorbed more negativity from the New Orleans attack, where people died, and thoughts and prayers to those victims of the families who died. One of the guys that died, his last text was, "Happy New Year, Daddy," to his dad. And he was, I believe, around 20 years old, died on New Orleans. And the bill of don't say gay is more important to that for that. They're so afraid because, oh my God, I think the guy that did it was of this faith, religion, or whatever. I could go on for days. Bottom line, indefensible. It's indefensible. I'm tired of, I talk about these things because I feel like this could be an escape to say, I want to hear somebody talk against this and go against the grain and give a more authentic take. This is it. You cover the New Orleans tragedy if you want to go to the political spectrum because it involves sports. It was on a day where massive sports entertainment activities were being taken place. And of course, we have to go through this crap every single time. So, but wait, there's more. Now, Stephen A. Smith, and this is actually a kind of a more interesting one because they could have had a point here, but the way that they twist it is like, oh my gosh, you're missing the point. And another analyst did a good job of this. I won't admit, or I will admit, but I want to listen. Like Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharpe here are talking about Patriots head coach. He did one full season as a Patriots head coach, and he was just fired as soon as the season ended without really getting a real shot to really develop, Drake May. He just, essentially usurped Bill Belichick as the head coach of the Patriots. So 1 year and this dude's out, right? And this is a guy that they essentially reportedly paved the way for in New England. And he was fired. And so the crew goes into talking about what this is about and what their thoughts on it, and they take their stances of solidarity, if you will.
That's what this is about. This is about Mike Vrabel. That's who they wanted. No question about it. And he's a more seasoned, more experienced coach. I don't like this. They call it Black Friday Black Monday rather for a reason. This certainly typifies it. I don't know why it's not called White Monday. Doug Peterson got fired from Jacksonville. He deserved that firing. Gerard Mayo clearly was not given an opportunity, a lengthy enough opportunity, considering what Bill Belichick left him with from a talent perspective, considering the record, considering the way the team performed. He didn't help himself with some of the comments he made, calling the team soft and what have you, and having to retract statements. And we get all of that. But no matter what we can point to, at the end of the day, the folks in New England were turning against Gerard Mayo. We all know this. And I think it has something to do with the fact that Vrabel is available. And that's really what's going on here. They don't want to lose him, especially the team like the New York Jets. They want to be in the running, and they can't do that with him as the head coach.
Yeah. And so Stephen A., I've actually been more in the praise spectrum with Stephen A. as of late, because once he kind of got his own, like he started doing his own private show, the Stephen A. Smith show and whatnot, and he's kind of opened up his eyes a little bit more and been a lot more efficient with his takes. But you know, the comments about, like, I don't know what they call it. They should be calling it like Black Monday, whatever, and they should be calling it White Monday and whatnot, and bringing race into the fact where it's like, oh, okay, well, you know, we're going to call it Black Monday because all black coaches are going to get fired right after the season. They don't get a shot and whatnot. And we go through this argument every year, and it's almost like you get a piece of paper, a script, if you will, and slide it to Stephen A. and they go, hey, there's a comment in here I want you to read. It has to do with race, but I want you to say it and just say it, this one part. And after you're done saying that, well, then you can make logical sense however you please with your own facts and statistical analysis. But you just got to make sure you say this right here because we're ESPN. And Stephen A. Smith gets it, and he's like, oh, we should call it Black Monday because we know black coaches get fired on days like today, you know, and white coaches get more opportunities than black coaches. And it's like, oh, here we go again. Then, shortly after that, the last, I guess half or three quarters of the clip, Stephen A. Smith starts making sense. I could tell that it's almost like the network wanted him to say, like, okay, Vrabel's getting this opportunity for the Patriots because he's white and they didn't want a black coach or whatnot, which is nonsense. Which is why I said Stephen A. started making sense towards the end, where it was like he could bring his own logic and analysis into the scenario without race being involved. And he goes in and he's saying, Gerard Mayo made some comments that kind of hurt himself earlier on the season, calling his team soft. And, he made excuses for Gerard Mayo, saying that, Bill Belichick didn't leave him the best talent in the league, which, is part true and part false and whatnot. Because as Bill Belichick mentioned before, when he called those guys soft, Gerard Mayo called them soft, Bill Belichick said, well, we were, top 5 in rush defense last year, and those are the same guys that were there last year, so I'm not sure what he's getting at. And you're like, ooh, like, okay, maybe he's just not as good as a coach as Bill Belichick and needs some time to grow. That point makes a whole lot of sense, to say, well, Gerard Mayo didn't get a fair shot. That's 100% true. I believe that Gerard Mayo, as much as I didn't like his first year at all, and I understand like the decision to go with Jacoby Brissett to start the year was kind of shaky to me. And then they put in Drake May, and you're like, okay, Drake May can play. And, you still, wind up having a losing season and whatnot. And that's understandable knowing the talent index that you inherited. And in a first-year head coach, I mean, Gronk made a great point, and he was about to start really cooking on his network at Fox, and they had to cut him off and go to commercial. But he made a great point. He said, "Well, Jimmy Johnson, you went 1-15 in your first year as head coach, and then what happened? Then you won 3 Super Bowls and become one of the most winning coaches of your time." And they're like, "Oh, we got to go commercial," and it's like, "Oh, excuse me, like." Are we not a sports channel? And so I think Gronk's message needs to be heard. It's a crazy thing to say. I mean, the guy's kind of a doofus a little bit. I love Gronk. I'm just saying he's always been, he's kind of a doofus. But he was going to make some great points there, and I would be really interested to hear what he had to say about that narrative. But one thing's for sure, 1 year as a head coach, and you hurt yourself throughout the year making certain decisions and saying certain things about your own unit. You lose the respect of the locker room instantly. You call your guys soft to the public, who's going to play for you? Like, who wants to play for that coach? And so I think Gerard Mayo did it to himself. And I think, like I said, the decisions and the comments that he made throughout the year, the racial comments he made, I think, at the preseason, when the season was first getting started, it just was like Robert Kraft was pressing there going, what? Like, I didn't ask for any of this. And Robert Kraft is a prick himself, but Gerard Mayo, like, yes, he probably deserved one more year, but at the same time, there were no signs this year that this guy had any capability of being one of the greats. There was just none. And I'm no NFL head coach, but whenever you lose the respect of the locker room, it's over. It is over. No one wants to play for you. No ownership wants to have you around, and go find an assistant head coaching job somewhere else. And, you know, the qualification or the quality of the coaching, that's all in question, right? I don't know what he says in the meetings. I don't know what he says in practice. But I do know what he said to the public 3 times. And I do know the decisions he made publicly with the quarterback scenario. And I think that's what made the decision. And, you know, going from Vrabel, who was a part of that Belichick tree, essentially, you know, I believe he played in New England, did a great job coaching the Tennessee Titans. I mean, they appeared in an AFC Championship game with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill as the quarterback. Like, he outsmarted Bill Belichick one time. And believe me, if they're right about this whole Mike Vrabel agenda, which I think Stephen A. is, I think he's right that they're going out for Mike Vrabel. I think that they're going to twist this into a racial thing. Once again, it's coming, and gear up for it, because people are going to be laughing about it. People are going to be commenting on it. It's going to get engagement. It's going to get clicks for engagement and whatnot. But in reality, who's the more qualified coach? Patriots are kind of in like we want to win back the trust of the fans. Let's go get a more qualified coach who we know can get the job done, and who was wrongfully fired from the Titans after the job he was doing. And let's give him young Drake May. You know, we haven't seen Vrabel with a high ceiling quarterback. Let's get him a good offensive coordinator, and let's go. And let's see how that's the direction I want to go as an owner. And maybe Gerard Mayo gets an opportunity somewhere else and works as a defensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator, whatever his speciality is. But yeah, I just think that, with all that being said, that it was just a very interesting way to go about it, and it's just one of those things that the network continues to try and do. And then let's move on to a different topic here. And I think we'll go into the college football atmosphere with Lane Kiffin here. And this is about a 90-second video here. And it's Lane Kiffin. And I attacked Lane Kiffin last week, and he did a great job at the bowl game. Not just Lane Kiffin, but I attacked the SEC because I'm still a believer that it's their own fault that they didn't make it into the college football playoffs. You know, they expanded, and they just didn't get the job done. And in the bowl games, they didn't really show up. Now, granted, people forget this. With the SEC, where literally almost all draft picks come from, those big power 3 conferences, like the Big Ten, the SEC and the ACC, those types of schools, and then you can add Notre Dame in there. Like, those are where the draft picks come from. So when those bowl game comes around and there's nothing to play for, and the young guns got to get their playing time in, you know, they don't have to be redshirted. They can play one of their games, and you get to see what the future of your organization has the following year. Like, that's an opportunity for those SEC teams to look and see what they have. And so a lot of the players leave. A lot of the players enter the transfer portal because everyone's hitting the transfer portal nowadays. So when you're seeing these SEC teams play and and they're losing, I don't really look at it as like the SEC sucks sort of thing. Because when the games matter outside of this year, like the narrative is the SEC normally gets the job done. And we've seen Alabama dominate, we've seen Georgia dominate, but people have made some really good points about the SEC. And I'm believing that now that colleges are publicly allowed to pay their athletes, I think the scales are starting to balance. And I think that's great for college football. And I've admittedly said that I've had an SEC bias, and this year the tides have turned. This year I can say, whoa, like those Big Ten schools is a powerhouse too. I mean, you get Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and all these different teams in there. The ACC, SMU in the future is going to look great. Clemson's, always kind of been there. Miami's looking a lot better. And all these coaches, who people tend to forget, a lot of these coaches that are winning, the Indiana coach, the Miami coach, and you can keep going, the Ole Miss coach, those are all from Saban's tree. So to say that the SEC is not a powerhouse, it's part of fallacy, and then it's like you can find the evidence to debunk it too. So the official position on that is to be determined, but let's listen to Lane Kiffin talk about the status of the SEC compared to other ones. And I just think that he goes off in a little, his tangents just get old.
It's why it's just different. It's just totally different. And these comparisons of other conferences and ACC and Big 12, I mean, it's just like, you might as well be in different leagues, not conferences, different leagues. Like here's the NFL, here's the SEC, here's those few Big Ten teams, and then here's everybody else. So you're going to see it in the draft. It'll be different, like it always is with the SEC, the amount of kids drafted out of here and there. And so it's really a bad system. Here you go. You got me going. It's just a bad system. It's a bad system. And you got people in there in place of it. And I don't know, they gave me the list of the coaches today. I mean, those coaches ever been down here in the deep South into these stadiums and played in these games that are on this. So how do they even know? How do they even know what it's like to have to go win in these stadiums, in these places, and on the road of teams that they say, well, these teams are 500 teams. And we have, the week where the three favorites all lose on, the senior day and night in three of the hardest stadiums in America to play. It's much different than where these other conferences go and play. They're, 6-6 teams that they got to go play, or 5-5 teams at the time. It's totally different. And you got to get up for it every week. It's a lot easier when you got to get up for 2 games a year, to get your team up.
Yeah, so when Lane Kiffin gets going, it's hard to take it by heart because he gets really highly emotional about pretty much everything that involves the SEC. And I think what pisses off most of the audience and the fans is that the SEC thinks that their shit don't stink. And, and that's true in a lot of cases. But when you look at the SEC, he's right. When you go to you use these bowl games as an example of, like, oh, well, this conference is better than the SEC. This conference versus the SEC in bowl games, or the SEC versus all the other conferences in their bowl games have a losing record and whatnot. And like I said earlier, a lot of those players enter the transfer portal. A lot of those players are going into the draft, like Lane Kiffin just mentioned. And I think when you look at all of that and you start to evaluate the SEC for what it is a powerhouse, along with some of the other Big Ten schools, along with some maybe ACC schools, but almost none of those schools, more than once a year, are going to those big time stadiums in the South consistently every week. I'm going to quote my Gramps here. He says, in the SEC, you play somebody every week. Every week you got to play somebody. Well, he's an Arkansas fan. So when you go look at Arkansas' schedule, you go, wow. They played all of those teams and finished 6-6. That's impressive. One of my best friends, Oklahoma Sooner fan, he's like, I wasn't aware of this. Go look at who Oklahoma played this year. Like, yeah, we're not that good. We had some things to figure out. I thought our defense was pretty good. But go look at it, and you're like, wow. Oklahoma played all these different teams. I mean, both Arkansas and Oklahoma played like all 6 of the top SEC teams throughout their schedule, and they finished 6-6. Which games do you think that they won? The out-of-conference games? and then they went, 3-5 or whatever in conference, 3-2-6 in conference, and they won 4-0 outside of the conference or whatever during the season. People forget that actually happens. When these teams go off on a 4-0 rant to begin the season, like Ole Miss didn't really play anybody great outside of their conference this year specifically, but then you go look at like Texas A&M, and they played Notre Dame week 1, and you're like, oh, okay. And then South Carolina went and played Clemson the last game of the year, and you like the one that you can't really find an excuse for is like when Alabama loses to like Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is like good in baseball, and it's a great educational school from what I understand, but the school is under renovation, I believe, and it's like 50% capacity, and you go there and you lose. But like Diego Pavia is not a bad quarterback. Like the dude's spicy. He's in his 6th year or whatever. He just got granted a 7th year, and Lane Kiffin even chips at that. But like I guess what I'm trying to get at here is when you have the SEC playing the schedule that it plays, and then you go look at the ACC schedule, like Indiana can get away with only playing Ohio State as like a top 10 team. Well, the SEC plays somebody within the top 5, the top 10, the top 15, the top 20 weekly. And you saw it versus Texas A&M and Auburn. You saw Auburn beat, Alabama previously in the past. You saw it with Kentucky and Ole Miss. You saw it in Kentucky, they're not a great football team, but like it's an SEC schedule. You're going to play in Kentucky or wherever. Georgia had a really tough time versus Kentucky at their stadium because these stadiums sell out for these big brand games. And these coaches and these committees and these fans and these people on X and stuff like that, when they go after the SEC for this sort of a thing, it makes no sense to me because I'm like, well, you guys are playing an 8 conference game schedule versus SEC teams. So when Oklahoma or Arkansas plays 6 of those 8 games versus teams over 500 that were like in contention for the SEC championship, like I don't understand what the argument is there because no other coach or division or conference is doing that. Therefore, or I should say furthermore, when you look at this year, and I've talked about it before, when it expanded the playoffs, right? 12 teams. How many teams from each conference got into the college football playoff? Well, essentially, it's like the top 2 or 3. You can't go 3 for every conference because that would be a 12 for the Power 4. So it's like 2 to 3 per conference based on your wins and losses. And the SEC had like 3 or 4 9-3 teams, and then an 8-4 team that was, if they won, 9-3, and then you would have had 10-2 Texas and 9-3 Georgia or whatever. Hell, Tennessee was 10-2 and didn't make it to their SEC championship game. So when you look at that, I just think it's a fallacy. I think, yes, the SEC missed their chance this year. I think it was a down year for the SEC in terms of opportunity. Quality of play, I don't think fell off. I just think it got really, really competitive because now everyone is paying their players. And so that goes back to me saying that the balances or the scales have balanced, which is great for college football. People are looking at this as a negative thing, and they want to bash the SEC for it. But this is what everybody's always wanted. They've wanted, kind of equity within the college football atmosphere, and now you're getting it. Oregon can go into an SEC environment, once or twice a year if they have it on their schedule. They meet in the playoffs. They play multiple SEC teams in their bracket, and same for any other team in any part of the bracket. You have the opportunity now to go improve. And now, another thing with these bowl games in the SEC schedule is they're all at neutral sites, and some might be geographically biased towards the specific team's location, which they have no control over. But you're not playing at Mississippi State at home, and they suck this year. But you go in there and all the cowbells are ringing. That's not an easy place to play. And I can go on and on and on about all this kind of stuff, but I still think the SEC, and like Lane Kiffin mentioned, I think he was right about a lot of what he said. And you'll see it in the draft, and you'll see it in their schedule, and you'll see it in the environments they play in, and you'll see it in the playoffs, like the majority of the time. It's not every year, but the majority of the time. And, the hypotheticals win all the time, right? Like, so the Lane Kiffin's hypotheticals of like, well, if I was in the playoff, like I'd beat those teams. Well, yeah, you're going to win that hypothetical, like I mentioned in the previous episode. That's not the argument here. The argument here is that if people want to bash the SEC, right? Well, I don't think that's the right argument. I think the argument is, hey, because everybody's now paying their players and some of these smaller schools can't afford to pay what the other big schools are paying. Well, in reality, and there's a lot of flaws in college football, the scales are starting to balance. And I think that's one of the few good things about college football this year, like as things have been shifting towards a new era of college football, because there's a lot of issues with it right now. You know, I just mentioned, teams not being able to pay what other teams pay. That's going to be a problem long term. And so there's going to have to be caps. It's literally going to be big school, small school. There's going to be it's like 3 different grades of teams. There's going to be like an FBS subdivision, and then the FCS. It's almost like the MLB. You got the bigs, you got AAA, and you got AA. And so that's going to be interesting to see. And then you got, JUCO might be like in between that or whatever. And they're granting all these years to these different players. Like, again, a lot of problems with the college football playoffs. But that's one thing. This is one thing you can take away and say the scales are balancing. The teams are getting evener because everybody's able to pay publicly now. It's not just allegations that the SEC is paying their players and other teams can't. Everyone was doing it. Don't be naive. Nobody was born yesterday. The SEC is still going to be a powerhouse. So are the Big Ten teams. So are some of the ACC teams. Those big brands are going to be dominant in college football. And you'll probably see the same 6-ish teams in the college football playoff every year, which is fine. That's what you pay to look at. So, all right. Big rant there from college football, from, I guess racism in sports to Marcus Freeman's great comments after his big win. Now I guess we'll get into the funny stuff. And, I kind of led off the episode with a little bit of the skill from Shannon Sharp or whatever. We're going to go into kind of what these, you can go on for days, but I think we're going to talk a lot about it on the Stats and Scars episode coming out on Thursday or later this week. But in terms of like the Joy Taylor stuff and whatnot, like, Twitter's going off, right? They're having so much fun with this argument. And here is the details. There's a 42-page lawsuit filed against Skip Bayless at Fox Sports 1. And then it involves Joy Taylor, who is a female host on the show Speak. The person filing the lawsuit was a hairdresser of Muslim faith, which is relevant to the story, I guess. And so you're going to get a crack at this. If you haven't heard about this, like, again, I always talk about people, you got to join X. You'll get the information like instantly, and then it like trickles onto other like Instagram like 4 or 5 days later. And then somebody sent it to me. I was like, bro, I saw this like 4 days ago. So the lawsuit, here's a little synopsis. The lawsuit was filed against Skip Bayless, was filed by, I'm just going to say her last name because I can't pronounce it, Faraji, a former hairstylist at Fox Sports who worked there from 2012 to 2024. The 42-page lawsuit filed on January 3rd in Los Angeles accuses Bayless, along with Fox Sports, FS1, FS2, Fox Sports Executive Vice President Charlie Dixon, and FS1 host Joy Taylor, of multiple counts including sexual battery, hostile work environment based on sex, gender, race, national origin, and disability, failure to prevent harassment, negligent supervision, hiring and retention, retaliation, and wrongful termination. So, here are the allegations against Skip Bayless. Faraji claims that after joining the Undisputed Morning Show, Bayless engaged in inappropriate behavior, including giving her lingering hugs and kisses on the cheek while pressing his body against hers. This is the funny part. She alleges that Bayless propositioned her for sex by offering $1.5 million, claiming he could change her life. He also reportedly accused her of having a sexual relationship with his former co-host, Shannon Sharp. Additionally, Bayless allegedly made inappropriate comments about her Muslim faith, suggesting her father might have had multiple wives in a derogatory context. Okay, this is crazy because there's two different sides of the argument with this, and I wanted to make fun of this scenario, and because you got the believe all women era right now, and like anybody could say like anything about a man, and everybody could believe it's true. It's defamation a lot of the times. It's ruined athletes' careers. Sean Oakman from Baylor, Matt Araiza, the punter who's on I think the Bills, like those people. You say rape, and you're like, oh, like this guy's defamed for the rest of his life and labeled as a rapist, and it's guilty until proven innocent. And even when you're innocent, you still get the allegations, right? That you're probably guilty, even though you got innocent. It's all messed up. But offering $1.5 million, saying he can change your life, damn, it's like, hey, I got a wife and all this kind of stuff, but hey, how about $1.5 million from an offshore foreign account, and I could change your life, baby? And it's like, whoa, like I thought I was just doing your 55-year-old hair today. Like I thought you were gonna just show up in your Jordans. I'll take the picture of you posing in your Air Jordans today, but I ain't giving up the cooch. And so here's some other allegations. Faraji also accuses Charlie Dixon of grabbing her buttocks at a birthday party when she confided in Joy Taylor talking about this. Taylor allegedly told her to, quote, get over it. Faraji claims she reported these incidents to Fox's Human Resources, but her concerns were not addressed. Shocking. Human Resources do not do their job. Really shocking there. And instead, she faced retaliation. So Joy Taylor, and we'll get into her in a second, metaphorically, she's talking about, oh, you just get over it. Like, people grab my ass all the time. They're squeezing my tits and whatever. And, it's fine. You just got to get over it. That's how you make it in this lifestyle. Like, Skip Bayless want to offer you $1.5 million to have sex. Go have sex for 10 minutes, come back, you're $1.5 million richer. Like that's kind of the notion to what she's saying there, right? And there's some broader claims against Fox, but that's kind of the rundown of this thing. So here is the involvement of Joy Taylor. A few months after meeting Mr. Acho, that is Emmanuel Acho, at the lunch, Miss Faraji noticed him in the hallway while at work. Faraji later asked Joy Taylor, if Emmanuel Acho also worked at Fox. Joy Taylor confirmed and explained that she wanted Emmanuel Acho to eventually recommend her on the show Speak for Yourself. Faraji became alarmed and warned Joy Taylor that she probably not sleep with Mr. Dixon and Mr. Acho at the same time, as Mr. Dixon is a very powerful man that may become very angry. And Dixon is the executive vice president at Fox. Joy Taylor told her not to worry about it. She explained that she was also now powerful, and once Mr. Dixon was no longer useful to her, she would follow through on her plan to tell the company that he forced himself on her. She would not allow herself to be forced out by Mr. Dixon like other women talent. Oh my gosh. So then let's go into Joy Taylor's involvement in the lawsuit after some short comments here. So basically, Joy Taylor's saying, well, I could sleep with both Emmanuel Acho and Dixon, and that could elevate my career and whatnot. I want to be on Speak for Yourself. I want to elevate my career. I've been working with Colin Cowherd for a while, and I've been showing my cleavage on this show for quite some time. And I already get around with get my status from my brother Jason Taylor, who was a great NFL athlete, and now it's my time to shine. And I'm going to get it in the way that I think I can do it best, and that's through my sexuality. That's through my physical appearance. And I'll probably just, I'll probably sleep with both of them, or maybe just one of them, whatever one works best. And if Mr. Dixon is no longer useful for me, then I'll just say he raped me. It's like, okay, that's a great idea. Strong, independent women, right? Great idea, Joy Taylor. Let's just go out there and, spread the legs out and fly like an eagle, and maybe you'll get on Speak, which, what's so funny about this is I've been going after Speak for a long time. I think the show is hot garbage. Whenever Joy Taylor got added onto the show, and then you get Emmanuel Acho, speaking in terms of what you can say and what I can say about how I can convey it and blah, 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 and here's my stats and why. And he talks like that, and he basically says a whole bunch of complicated LY words, and it just means nothing when you finish with it. You're like, did I just get dumber? And then you move over to Shady McCoy, and it was like, did anybody give him any stats at all? Did anybody give him any information on what we're going to talk about today? Because he is just talking out of his ass. And then the guy, I've always said this about Speak, the guy at the far right part of the table, no matter who it is, whether it's David Hellman, James Jones, those are the guys that make any sense at all. They're the only ones that actually make good points on the show. So now they got the facility, and they have Speak with Paul Pierce. He's going to talk NFL. But now they have the facility, and that's Chase Daniel, Shady McCoy, Emmanuel Acho. It's like, well, we got to separate Acho and Joy. Otherwise, they're gonna keep, having sexual relations. Okay, so a little bit about that. And actually, one last comment with that. I went so into kind of going after the show for calling out for the lies that they spread on the show and like the false narratives about athletes that I was blocked by Emmanuel Acho. So even if I wanted to see what he has said so far about this, I'd have to go to a burner account essentially because I was blocked. And this was like in October. I said something about how his show was ass or whatever. It was something specific about a certain athlete, probably Dak Prescott or something. But he blocked me pretty instantly. It was starting to get a lot of attention on X. It was like over 10K views, and it had only been like there for 2 hours, and it was just comments shut down, block this guy. So I find that hilarious because for you want to talk about uncomfortable conversations with the black man, that was one for him, except I was white. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's go into this a little bit. The Post references a workplace misconduct lawsuit against Fox Sports personnel, including Joy Taylor, where allegations of sexual harassment and discrimination were made by former Fox Sports hairstylist Nushin Faraj. So essentially what we're getting at here is that the 42-page lawsuit and Joy Taylor's involvement, what this article states essentially is that Joy Taylor and Emmanuel Acho, were in sexual relations with one another. And then X came out and just goes on a meme tangent. Like it was like the lightning war from World War II. It was just like, oh my God, just fast strikes everywhere. Like, oh, Emmanuel Acho barefoot in Joy Taylor's house. Oh, he was head deep in that. Emmanuel Acho smelling his finger or whatever after, leaving her apartment in a video, which he then deleted, talking about how Joy Taylor is a opinionated woman who is of color and blah, blah, blah. And she has done a fantastic job. It was almost like she had a gun to his head. He deleted that video. There were comments from Shannon Sharp on certain shows where he was saying, like Joy Taylor, whatever, blah, 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 and said some kind of flirtatious comment to her on air. Like everybody knew this shit was going down. And so now all that evidence is coming back. I swear, X is better than the FBI sometimes. People were going back to like 2013. And Faraji, surprisingly, the person that's filed the lawsuit against Skip Bayless, she even posted a happy birthday post to Skip Bayless, like in his house in like 2017, I think, like in between 2013 and 2017. And you're like, okay, so there might be more to the story here. So what I'm getting at is I believe in innocent until proven guilty. I think Skip Bayless is one of the hardest workers in the industry, even though I disagree with a lot of what he says. I mean, I just think that he probably had more things to like I've been told I wanted to get into this industry, right? I wanted to do it through ESPN originally. I wanted to do 97.5 and work for the radio station, kind of work my way up. And then I was just told by a lot of people that the business is nasty. And this lawsuit exposes that. And I thought like, well, I don't want to be controlled by what I say. I don't want to do this. I want to have my own freedom. I want to be an individual and do it my own way. And, and point to one person or an entity, God, right, and say, I want you to bless me. And if this is your path, then I'm going to follow that. I'd rather do it that way. And, I say all the things I say on this podcast and I start talking about God. You're probably like, oh, what a hypocrite. Well, I'm a sinner, so get over it. I'll ask for forgiveness at the end of this episode. And so what I'm getting at here is I don't think Skip Bayless should be defamed just yet. I think everybody should wait. It's going to be a while, right? But I think everybody should wait until everything is proven, right? And were these two people having sex? Were these comments made? I'm sure it's a nasty business. But if could it have been worse? Yeah, probably. Like Skip Bayless's comments on there, like that's like he said, she said, right? If there was a way to prove that he said what he said, then I'd be like, okay. But this happens all the time to men in our society. They're never safe. You could easily get a lawsuit. I mentioned the athletes prior that have lost their careers or damn near lost their careers because of women in their lives that they weren't around in a wise fashion. They didn't make the smartest decisions, and it cost them. And that's an advantage a lot of women these days tend to take. And I'm not trying to attack, but I'm just saying that's the reality. So, in terms of what I think happened, I really don't want to get into it. We might get into it more with the Stats and Scars episode when Jacob and Ryan joined the show. But I just wanted to come in here and kind of make fun of this scenario because I think it's hilarious. You offer $1.5 million to have sexual relations with your hairdresser, and then you start going after her Muslim faith. Well, you guys had multiple wives, right? I mean, come on, and you're like, whoa, oh, God, that's way worse. And then you got Joy Taylor. It's like, no wonder she sounds dumb with every take that she makes, or controlled is a better way to say it, because she slept her way to the top. So it's like, that's hilarious to me. It's a nasty business, and this person files a lawsuit and says, I ain't playing. Like, I'm going to expose the industry. So that's kind of my debunking narrative there. And I guess this show is going to get really controversial as we go along into season 3. And I'm hoping guests actually want to join the show and talk, because I think a whole different attitude would be presented to them. But yeah, let's see if we covered everything here. I mean, we're going to go into the college football matchup recap in the Stats and Scars episode. I have a lot to talk about within the sport, not outside of the sport. And we're going to get into the semifinal matchups and go on from there. But hopefully this episode was entertaining to you guys, and y'all caught a few laughs, and that, there was more clips that I could have shown, but I figured I rambled enough for you guys for about an hour that that we've covered it enough. But yeah, hey, look, season 3 is coming out in March. I want to make some new changes to the show. Like every season, we're gonna change some art. We're gonna change some criteria. I think we've gotten some really good traction in season 2, especially on platforms like TikTok, kind of a little bit on Instagram. Like X has done a fantastic job, and I've gone into like the buying followers thing. Like, I don't ever want to do that. I really believe a lot of people just do that, and I don't want to do that. And genuine, authentic, like, I may have 30 listeners or whatever. It's like, well, all 30 of those listeners are real, and I appreciate that. So we're going to keep rolling with this thing. Like I mentioned in the previous episode, I'm thankful. I'm looking forward to a great 2025, controversial, taking down the mainstream media, going after it in the best way I know how, presenting the facts and presenting the truth, from an authentic perspective, bringing on the contributors, bringing on new contributors, and bringing on guests. And I've been hinting and talking about guests being on the show for a while now, but new ideas pop up every year, and I'm excited to get into it. And, I think this season 3 is going to be a lot of fun. So I appreciate you guys joining the show. We will be back on Thursday for Stats and Scars with Jacob and Ryan, and we will discuss all things college football and NFL playoffs. So I hope you guys tune in for that. Clips will be out periodically throughout the week. In case you missed this entire episode, we'll have those out in 60-second formatted videos. So, all right, you can find us on all platforms by searching at Shatter the Script on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, by searching at Shatter the Script. And then with Instagram, TikTok, and X, you can find us at Shatter the Script as well. And share with your friends if you enjoy it. share the clips, like the clips, do all that stuff. And I really appreciate you guys' support. And I'll see y'all next week.